My sister stood at my engagement party with my fiancé's arm around her waist, announcing their love to our stunned family. 24 hours later, she watched in horror as he knocked on my office door, calling me ma'am and asking if I had a moment to discuss his employment status. The color drained from her face when she realized who really held the power in this triangle. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The string quartet played softly in the corner of the Riverside Garden Club as guests mingled on the terrace overlooking Lady Bird Lake. Austin's skyline twinkled in the distance, creating the perfect backdrop for what should have been the happiest night of my life. I adjusted the emerald cocktail dress I'd chosen specifically because Ryan always said it brought out my eyes, and surveyed the celebration my parents had so lovingly orchestrated. Everything was exactly as I'd envisioned during the months of planning. White roses and eucalyptus adorned every table. Fairy lights were strung between the oak trees, and the scent of jasmine drifted through the warm Texas evening. Our family and friends had gathered to celebrate Ryan and me, to toast the future we'd been building together for 3 years. The engagement ring on my finger caught the light as I raised my champagne flute, still marveling at how perfectly the vintage setting complemented the brilliant cut diamond. I had met Ryan Torres at a networking event downtown 2 years ago, though he didn't know then that I was already climbing the ranks at Tech Forward Solutions. He'd approached me at the bar with an easy smile and genuine curiosity about my work, assuming I was a junior employee based on my age and casual demeanor. I'd let him maintain that assumption, finding it refreshing to be appreciated for my personality rather than my professional status. By the time he realized I was significantly more senior than he'd imagined, we were already falling in love. The irony wasn't lost on me that his misconception about my career had actually strengthened our relationship initially. Ryan had pursued me without any agenda, without calculating how dating me might benefit his own advancement at Tech Forward. It had felt authentic in a way that previous relationships hadn't, where my success had often intimidated potential partners or attracted the wrong kind of attention entirely. My parents, Linda and Robert Hayes, moved through the crowd with practiced grace, ensuring every guest felt welcomed and appreciated. Dad, a retired petroleum engineer, had always been my biggest supporter, encouraging my business instincts from an early age. Mom, a former teacher turned community volunteer, possessed the social skills that made events like this seem effortless. Together, they'd created a warm, supportive environment that had shaped both my sister Chloe and me, though we'd certainly taken different paths. Chloe was holding court near the dessert table, animated as always when she had an audience. At 26, 2 years younger than me, she'd inherited Mom's natural charisma and Dad's stubborn determination, though she'd channeled those traits into her lifestyle blog and social media presence rather than traditional career advancement. Her success was undeniable, with nearly 500,000 followers hanging on her every post about fashion, travel, and living your best life. Tonight, she looked stunning in a flowing pink dress that perfectly complemented her highlighted blonde hair and carefully contoured features. Our relationship had always been complicated, marked by an undercurrent of competition that neither of us fully acknowledged. Growing up, I'd been the responsible older sister, focused on academics and long-term goals, while Chloe had been the spontaneous charmer who could talk her way out of any trouble. Teachers loved her infectious enthusiasm. Boys lined up to ask her to dances, and she'd sailed through high school on a combination of natural intelligence and social savvy that I'd envied, even as I excelled in my own quieter way. The dynamic had shifted somewhat as we'd entered adulthood, and I'd found professional success. But Chloe had adapted by building her own platform where her personality and lifestyle choices translated into genuine influence and income. Her blog, Chloe's Austin Adventures, had become a go-to resource for young professionals in the city, featuring everything from restaurant reviews to fashion finds to relationship advice. She'd even started getting invited to exclusive events and partnering with local businesses for sponsored content. Ryan emerged from conversation with my Uncle Tom and headed in my direction, his smile warm and familiar. He looked handsome in the navy suit we'd chosen together, his dark hair perfectly styled, his expression relaxed and happy. These were the moments I treasured most, seeing him comfortable and at ease with my family, fitting seamlessly into the life I'd built in Austin long before we'd met. "Having a good time?" he asked, slipping his arm around my waist as we watched our guests enjoy the celebration. "Perfect time," I replied, leaning into his familiar warmth. "I think your parents are finally warming up to the idea of having me as a daughter-in-law." Ryan laughed, glancing toward his parents, Patricia and James Torres, who were deep in conversation with my father about golf. "Mom's just protective. She wants to make sure you're serious about me and not just slumming it with a junior account manager." The comment stung slightly, though I knew he didn't intend it that way. Ryan still occasionally made references to our perceived professional disparity, assuming I was being generous by dating someone at his level within Tech Forward. He had no idea that I'd recently been promoted to senior partner, a development I'd been planning to share with him after the engagement party excitement settled. The promotion had come with significant equity in the company and decision-making authority that would fundamentally change my role and earning potential. Michael Carter, my business partner and mentor at Tech Forward, had been instrumental in my advancement. At 52, he'd built the company from a small consulting firm into one of Austin's most respected digital marketing agencies, and he'd recognized my strategic thinking and client relationship skills early in my tenure. The partnership offer had been his way of preparing for his own eventual transition to a more advisory role while ensuring the company's continued growth under leadership he trusted. I hadn't told Ryan about the promotion yet because the timing had never felt right. His own role at Tech Forward was solid but not particularly senior, and I'd been concerned about how the news might affect his confidence or our relationship dynamic. Looking back, this hesitation should have been a warning sign about the foundation we were building together. Healthy partnerships should be able to celebrate each other's successes without insecurity or resentment. Amanda, Natalie Brooks, appeared at my side, her bright smile infectious as always. My best friend since college had driven down from Dallas specifically for the engagement party, taking time off from her demanding job at a venture capital firm. At 29, Natalie had already made a name for herself in the male-dominated world of startup investing, and her success had always inspired my own professional ambitions. "This is absolutely beautiful," she continued, gesturing at the garden setting. "You've outdone yourself with the planning." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Mom deserves most of the credit," I replied, though I'd certainly been involved in every detail from the venue selection to the menu tasting. "She has a gift for making everything look effortless." Ryan excused himself to check on the bar situation, and Natalie immediately lowered her voice, her expression shifting to something more serious. "Can we talk privately for a minute? There's something I need to mention." A flicker of concern crossed my mind, but I nodded, following her toward a quieter corner of the terrace where the music and conversation wouldn't overwhelm our words. Natalie had always been direct, never one to sugarcoat difficult conversations, and her tone suggested this wasn't casual small talk. "I probably should have said something earlier," she began, glancing around to ensure we wouldn't be overheard. "But I wasn't sure how to bring it up, and I didn't want to ruin tonight unnecessarily." "What is it?" I asked, though part of me already sensed I might not want to hear her answer. "It's about Chloe and Ryan," she said carefully. "I've noticed them spending a lot of time together tonight, and their body language seems unusually comfortable, more familiar than I'd expect between your sister and your fiancé." I followed her gaze toward the dessert table where Chloe was indeed standing quite close to Ryan, their heads bent together in intimate conversation. As I watched, she placed her hand on his arm in a gesture that seemed natural and practiced, the kind of casual touch that develops between people who've spent significant time together. "They've gotten to know each other over the past few months," I said, though even as I spoke the words, I realized I couldn't actually account for much of that interaction. "Chloe's been helping with some of the wedding planning, and Ryan's been supportive." Natalie's expression remained diplomatically neutral, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "I'm sure it's nothing," she said. "I just wanted to mention it because sometimes outsiders notice things that are harder to see when you're in the middle of a situation." Before I could respond, the microphone crackled to life as my father stepped forward to offer the traditional toast. The crowd gradually quieted, glasses raised in anticipation of his words. Dad had always been an eloquent speaker, comfortable addressing groups whether in professional settings or family gatherings, and I knew his toast would be both heartfelt and perfectly pitched to the audience. "Friends and family," he began, his voice carrying easily across the terrace. "Linda and I are overjoyed to celebrate Amanda and Ryan tonight, two people who've found in each other the perfect complement to their individual strengths." I smiled, appreciating how he'd characterized our relationship as a partnership of equals, rather than focusing solely on traditional romantic elements. Dad had always encouraged my independence and professional ambitions, never suggesting that marriage should diminish my own goals or identity. "Amanda has always been our determined achiever," he continued, his eyes finding mine in the crowd. "From the time she was small, she approached every challenge with careful planning and unwavering commitment. Ryan, we've come to know you as someone who appreciates and supports those qualities in our daughter, and we're grateful for the happiness you've brought to her life." The applause was warm and genuine, and I felt a surge of gratitude for parents who'd raised me to believe I could achieve anything while also valuing the importance of loving relationships. As Dad stepped back from the microphone, I noticed Ryan moving toward the front of the group, apparently planning to offer his own remarks. "Thank you, Robert," Ryan said, his voice confident and clear. "I wanted to take a moment to share how grateful I am to be joining this wonderful family and to thank everyone for being here to celebrate with us tonight." He paused, scanning the crowd with a smile that had always been one of his most attractive features. "Amanda, you've changed my life in ways I never expected. Your intelligence, your ambition, your generous heart, all of it has made me want to be a better man." The words were lovely, exactly what I would have hoped to hear from my future husband in front of our assembled family and friends. Yet something in his delivery felt slightly rehearsed, as if he'd practiced the sentiment without fully inhabiting its meaning. "I also want to acknowledge someone else who's become incredibly important to me during this journey," Ryan continued, and I felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere. A collective breath held as people waited to understand where his remarks were heading. "Chloe, your friendship and support have meant more than you know. The conversations we've shared, the advice you've offered, the way you've helped me understand Amanda better, all of it has been invaluable." My sister stepped forward slightly, her cheeks flushed with what I initially interpreted as pleased embarrassment at being recognized publicly. But as I watched her expression more carefully, I noticed something else, a look of anticipation that seemed disproportionate to receiving a simple acknowledgement from her sister's fiancé. "In fact," Ryan said, his voice gaining strength, "those conversations have helped me realize something important about myself, about what I really want in a relationship, about who I really am when I'm with the right person." The crowd's energy shifted perceptibly, confusion replacing celebration as people began to sense that Ryan's speech was veering into unexpected territory. I felt my own smile faltering as I tried to process what I was hearing and where it might be leading. "Amanda, you're an incredible woman, and any man would be lucky to have you as a wife," Ryan continued, and the past tense of his phrasing sent a chill through me even before his next words confirmed my worst fears. "But I've realized that I'm not that man. I've fallen in love with someone else. someone who understands me in a way I never knew was possible. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of my champagne flute hitting the terrace as it slipped from my suddenly nerveless fingers. Ryan's eyes found Chloe's across the crowd, and the look that passed between them told me everything I needed to know about how long this betrayal had been developing. "Chloe and I have found something special together," Ryan announced, his voice gaining confidence as if finally speaking this truth aloud was liberating him from some burden he'd been carrying. "We tried to fight it out of respect for family relationships, but love doesn't follow convenient timelines." My sister stepped forward to join Ryan at the front of the group, her hand slipping naturally into his as if they'd rehearsed this moment. The gesture was intimate and practiced, confirming that their relationship had progressed far beyond stolen conversations and secret emotional connections. "I'm so sorry, Amanda," Chloe said, her voice carrying across the stunned crowd. "This isn't how we wanted you to find out, but we couldn't keep pretending anymore. What Ryan and I have found together is real, and it's worth the difficult conversations we all need to have." The audacity of her phrasing struck me like a physical blow. She was framing their betrayal as an inevitable discovery of true love, as if my feelings and our family relationships were merely obstacles to be navigated rather than sacred bonds they'd chosen to violate. The casual way she dismissed my pain and humiliation suggested a level of selfishness I'd never fully recognized in my sister before. I stood frozen, unable to process the magnitude of what had just happened in front of our entire extended family and friend group. The engagement party I'd planned so carefully had become the venue for the most humiliating moment of my adult life, orchestrated by the two people I'd trusted most completely. The crowd remained silent, uncertain how to respond to such an unprecedented social disaster. Some guests looked embarrassed, others angry, most simply confused about what was expected of them in this situation. My parents' faces reflected a mixture of shock and fury that would have been gratifying under different circumstances. Ryan and Chloe stood together, hands clasped, facing the crowd as if expecting some form of blessing or acceptance for their announcement. The disconnect between their evident relief at finally revealing their relationship and the destruction they'd just caused was staggering in its self-absorption. What they didn't know, what no one at the party knew except Michael Carter, who was conspicuously absent from the celebration, was that in exactly 36 hours, I would be sitting across from Ryan in my new corner office at Tech Forward Solutions, holding his employment future in my hands. The promotion I'd been planning to share with him after our engagement party would instead become the foundation for a conversation about professional expectations and personal accountability that neither he nor my sister could possibly anticipate. But in that moment, standing among the ruins of my carefully planned celebration, watching my fiancé and my sister present their betrayal as a love story worth celebrating, I felt only the sharp pain of simultaneous loss and the crystal clear recognition that my life had just taken a turn I never could have imagined. The aftermath of that evening unfolded like a slow-motion car crash that I could only watch from the sidelines. After Ryan and Chloe's announcement, our guests had dispersed in uncomfortable clusters, some offering awkward condolences, others simply fleeing the social carnage as quickly as politeness would allow. My parents had handled the immediate crisis with remarkable grace, thanking people for coming while making it clear that the celebration was definitively over. I had retreated to my childhood bedroom in my parents' Westlake Hills home, staring at the ceiling while processing the enormity of what had just occurred. The engagement ring felt heavy on my finger, a tangible reminder of promises that had apparently meant nothing to the man who'd placed it there just 3 months earlier. Every moment of our relationship was now suspect, every memory tainted by the knowledge that he'd been building something else entirely with my sister. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself, though that cut deep enough. It was the realization that I'd been living in a carefully constructed illusion, believing I knew and understood the people closest to me while missing obvious signs of their deception. How long had they been meeting secretly? How many of our family dinners had been opportunities for them to exchange meaningful glances? How many times had Chloe offered to help with wedding planning as an excuse to spend time with Ryan? My phone buzzed constantly throughout the night with messages from friends and extended family who'd witnessed the disaster. Most were supportive, expressing shock and outrage on my behalf, but a few carried an undertone of curiosity that made my stomach turn. Already, the story was being dissected and analyzed, my personal humiliation becoming entertainment for people who claimed to care about me. Natalie had stayed after the other guests left, sitting with me in my old room like we were teenagers again, processing some high school drama instead of the complete implosion of my adult life. Her presence was comforting, a reminder that not everyone I trusted was capable of such calculated betrayal. "I should have said something sooner," she murmured, guilt evident in her voice. "I noticed them together at your birthday party last month, but I convinced myself I was being paranoid." "What did you see?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the details. "Little things. The way he looked at her when she was talking. How she seemed to know exactly what drink to bring him from the bar. They had this easy familiarity that felt more intimate than in-law relationships usually develop." She paused, studying my expression. "But honestly, Amanda, I think part of me didn't want to believe it either. It seemed too cruel, even for people capable of selfishness." The validation that I hadn't been completely oblivious was somehow both comforting and devastating. If Natalie had noticed but dismissed the signs, then my own failure to recognize what was happening wasn't entirely due to willful blindness. Yet, it still meant that Ryan and Chloe had been building their relationship in plain sight, confident that their deception was sophisticated enough to escape detection. Sunday passed in a haze of emotional exhaustion and practical considerations that I wasn't ready to address. The wedding planned for 6 months away would need to be canceled, deposits potentially forfeited, vendors notified. Our shared apartment downtown would require decisions about lease obligations and personal belongings. The social media accounts where we'd documented our relationship would need to be updated or deleted. Most immediately, there was the question of Monday morning and how to navigate seeing Ryan at Tech Forward Solutions. He had no idea about my recent promotion to senior partner, still assuming I was just another mid-level employee he happened to be dating. The irony was almost absurd. While he'd been deceiving me about his feelings and relationship with my sister, I'd been keeping my own secret about professional advancement that would fundamentally alter the dynamic between us. "Michael Carter," called Sunday evening, his voice careful and professional despite our personal relationship. "Amanda, I heard about what happened last night. I'm so sorry you had to go through that publicly." "Word travels fast," I replied, not surprised that news of the engagement party disaster had already reached him. Austin's professional community was tight-knit, and something this dramatic would inevitably become common knowledge. Helen Rodriguez mentioned it. Her daughter was apparently at the party. He paused delicately. "I wanted to check on you, both personally and professionally. Tomorrow's partner meeting is still scheduled for 9, but we can postpone if you need more time to process everything." The partner meeting. In all the emotional chaos of the past 24 hours, I'd almost forgotten that Monday would officially mark my transition to senior leadership at Tech Forward. The paperwork had been finalized on Friday, but we'd planned to announce the promotion to the broader company after I'd had time to share the news with Ryan privately. "No postponement necessary," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "If anything, I could use the distraction of focusing on work right now." "Good. And Amanda, just so you're prepared, Ryan Torres is scheduled for his quarterly review on Tuesday. Given the circumstances, we should probably discuss how to handle that situation appropriately." The reminder sent a jolt through me. Ryan's performance review, something that would normally be handled by his direct supervisor, would now fall under my purview as senior partner. The man who'd just humiliated me in front of our entire social circle would be sitting across from me in 48 hours, expecting routine feedback on his professional development. "I'll handle it professionally," I assured Michael, though I had no idea yet what that would actually look like in practice. "I know you will. That's why you're the right person for this partnership." After we hung up, I spent the evening reviewing Ryan's personnel file and recent project evaluations, trying to separate my personal feelings from legitimate professional assessment. The truth was, his work performance had been adequate but not exceptional. He handled routine account management competently, but showed little initiative for strategic thinking or business development. His client relationships were friendly, but not particularly deep, and his project contributions were solid without being innovative. Under normal circumstances, this would translate to a satisfactory review with recommendations for areas of improvement. Nothing that would threaten his employment, but nothing that would suggest rapid advancement either. Now, with the added complexity of our personal situation, I needed to be even more careful to ensure my evaluation was based solely on professional merit. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that made Austin beautiful. Clear skies and comfortable. Temperatures that should have lifted my spirits. Instead, I felt hollow and mechanical as I prepared for what would be one of the most challenging days of my professional life. I chose a charcoal gray suit that projected authority without being aggressive, wanting to establish the right tone for my first day as senior partner. The tech-forward building was a converted warehouse in East Austin, modern and open with exposed brick walls and floor-to-ceiling windows that flooded the space with natural light. I'd always loved the creative energy of the office, the collaborative atmosphere that Michael had cultivated since founding the company 8 years earlier. Today, that familiar environment felt different, charged with new significance as I prepared to assume leadership responsibilities I'd been working toward for years. I arrived early, using the time before other employees started their day to settle into my new office and review the agenda for the partner meeting. The space was significantly larger than my previous workspace, with a view of the Austin skyline and room for a proper conference table where I could host client meetings and strategic planning sessions. Michael knocked on my door at exactly 8:30, carrying 2 coffee cups and wearing the expression of someone prepared for a difficult conversation. "How are you holding up?" he asked, settling into one of the chairs across from my desk. "Professionally, I'm fine," I replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Personally, I'm still processing everything, but I'm compartmentalizing effectively enough to handle my responsibilities here." "Good. That's exactly what I'd expect from you." He pulled out a folder containing the partnership documents and transition timeline. "Before we head into the meeting, I want to make sure you're comfortable with how we handle the announcement to the team. We can keep it simple and focus on your qualifications and vision for the company's growth." I nodded, appreciating his sensitivity to the situation. I'd prefer to keep it straightforward and professional. No mention of personal circumstances, just the business rationale for the partnership structure. "Agreed. And Amanda, I want you to know that this promotion has nothing to do with sympathy for your current situation. You've earned this position through your strategic thinking, client relationships, and leadership potential. Don't let anyone, including yourself, suggest otherwise." The validation meant more than I could express, particularly given the emotional battering my confidence had taken over the weekend. Ryan's betrayal had left me questioning my judgment about people and relationships, and it was crucial to remember that my professional capabilities remained intact regardless of personal disappointments. The partner meeting included department heads and senior staff, 12 people who would now be reporting to Michael and me in our shared leadership structure. As I outlined my vision for expanding our client base and developing new service offerings, I felt some of my natural confidence returning. These were areas where I excelled, where my strategic thinking and analytical skills created genuine value. "Questions about the transition or new reporting structure?" Michael asked as we concluded the formal presentation. Sarah Martinez, our head of client services, raised her hand. Will this affect current project timelines or client relationships? Not at all, I replied. We're expanding leadership capacity, not disrupting existing operations. If anything, having two partners should improve our responsiveness to client needs and strategic opportunities. The meeting concluded with what felt like genuine enthusiasm for the changes, and I began to feel more grounded in my professional identity. Whatever chaos Ryan and Chloe had created in my personal life, my career remained a source of strength and purpose that they couldn't touch. As we filed out of the conference room, I noticed Ryan arriving for his regular Monday morning routine, stopping at the coffee station in the main workspace before heading to his desk. He looked tired, possibly hungover, but not particularly troubled by the weekend's events. If anything, he seemed almost relieved, as if finally revealing his relationship with Chloe had lifted some burden he'd been carrying. The casual way he greeted colleagues and settled into his morning tasks suggested he had no sense of the professional complications his personal choices might create. In his mind, we were simply two people who worked at the same company and happened to have dated until things didn't work out. He couldn't imagine that our professional relationship was about to become significantly more complex. I spent the morning in back-to-back client calls and strategic planning sessions, grateful for the demanding schedule that kept my mind occupied with concrete problems I could actually solve. The work felt particularly satisfying today, a reminder that I had skills and expertise that extended far beyond my role as someone's girlfriend or sister. Around 11, Michael stopped by my office with an update that made my stomach tighten. Ryan Torres just requested a meeting with me about his quarterly review. Apparently, he wants to discuss some concerns about the evaluation process. What kind of concerns? I asked, though I suspected I already knew where this was heading. He didn't elaborate, but I imagine he's worried about potential bias given your personal situation. He probably wants reassurance that the review will be handled objectively. The irony was staggering. Ryan was concerned about bias affecting his professional treatment, apparently oblivious to the fact that his own actions had created the conflict of interest he was now worried about. He wanted protection from consequences he couldn't even properly identify. What did you tell him? That his review would be conducted by his appropriate supervisor according to standard company protocols. I didn't mention the partnership transition since we haven't made the general announcement yet. This meant Ryan would walk into his Tuesday review expecting to meet with his usual supervisor, only to discover that I now held significantly more authority over his career trajectory than he'd ever imagined. The revelation would be a shock, but it would also be an opportunity to establish clear boundaries between our personal and professional interactions. The rest of Monday passed in a blur of meetings and planning sessions, and I was surprised to realize that I'd made it through the day without dwelling constantly on Ryan and Chloe's betrayal. Work provided structure and purpose that helped contain the emotional turmoil, offering concrete challenges that responded to skill and effort, rather than the unpredictable dynamics of personal relationships. As the office began to empty late in the afternoon, I noticed Ryan packing up his desk with the same casual efficiency he'd always displayed. He caught sight of me through the glass wall of my office and offered a tentative wave, apparently testing whether we could maintain cordial professional interactions despite the weekend's personal drama. I nodded politely in response, maintaining the kind of neutral professionalism appropriate between colleagues who'd experienced personal complications. There was no hint in his expression that he suspected anything had changed in our professional dynamic. No awareness that tomorrow's review would occur under entirely different circumstances than he anticipated. That evening, I sat in my downtown apartment reviewing Ryan's performance files one final time, ensuring that my evaluation was based solely on documented professional criteria. The process was actually clarifying, forcing me to separate legitimate workplace concerns from personal grievances in a way that would serve both of us better in the long run. His work was competent, but not exceptional, his client relationships adequate, but not particularly strong. His strategic contributions minimal, but not problematic. These were simply facts, documented through performance metrics and supervisor feedback that had nothing to do with our personal relationship or its dramatic conclusion. Tomorrow would bring the first real test of my ability to maintain professional boundaries while processing personal betrayal. Ryan had no idea that the power dynamic between us had shifted fundamentally, that the woman he'd humiliated publicly now held significant influence over his career trajectory. The revelation would be uncomfortable for both of us, but it would also establish the new reality we'd need to navigate moving forward. As I prepared for what would undoubtedly be a challenging day, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Saturday night's disaster, a sense of anticipation rather than dread. Not because I was looking forward to confronting Ryan, but because I was finally ready to reclaim agency in a situation where I'd been caught completely off guard. The woman who'd stood frozen at her own engagement party while her fiancé announced his love for her sister was about to remind everyone involved that professional competence and personal resilience were qualities that couldn't be stolen or destroyed by someone else's poor choices. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of confidence I hadn't felt since before the engagement party disaster. I'd slept better than expected, possibly because I finally had something concrete to focus on rather than just processing emotional betrayal. Today would mark the first time Ryan and I spoke privately since his public announcement, and I was curious to see how he planned to navigate the professional relationship he'd complicated so dramatically. I dressed carefully in a navy blue suit that projected authority without being intimidating, wanting to establish the right tone for what would be a delicate conversation. The goal wasn't to punish Ryan professionally for his personal choices, but to make clear that our working relationship would continue on strictly professional terms, regardless of the chaos he'd created in other areas of our lives. The general company announcement about my partnership had been sent out Monday evening, generating congratulatory emails and messages that provided a welcome boost to my confidence. Several clients had already reached out to express enthusiasm about working with me in my expanded role, validating Michael's decision to promote me regardless of personal circumstances. Ryan's review was scheduled for 10 o'clock, giving me time to handle morning correspondence and prepare mentally for what would likely be an uncomfortable conversation. I'd reviewed his file thoroughly, ensuring that my evaluation was based entirely on documented performance metrics rather than personal feelings. At exactly 10, my assistant knocked on the door to announce that Ryan Torres was here for his quarterly review. I took a deep breath, centering myself in my professional identity rather than the personal hurt that still simmered beneath the surface. "Send him in, please." Ryan entered my office with the casual confidence he'd always displayed at work, apparently expecting a routine conversation with whoever was handling his evaluation. His expression shifted to confusion, then shock, as he realized he was looking at me sitting behind the large desk in what was obviously a senior executive's office. "Amanda," he said, stopping just inside the doorway. "I think there's been some kind of mistake. I'm here for my quarterly review with my supervisor." "There's no mistake," I replied calmly, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "Please, have a seat." He remained standing, his confusion evident as he tried to process what he was seeing. "I don't understand. This isn't your office. You work in client services, not management." "Actually, I've recently been promoted to senior partner," I explained, keeping my tone neutral and professional. "The announcement went out to all employees yesterday evening. As senior partner, quarterly reviews for your department now fall under my supervision." The color drained from Ryan's face as the implications of this revelation began to register. The woman he'd publicly humiliated 3 days earlier now held significant authority over his career trajectory, a development he clearly hadn't anticipated when he'd chosen to announce his relationship with my sister at our engagement party. "This is," he started, then stopped, apparently realizing that any objection to my professional authority would sound both inappropriate and potentially damaging to his own position. This is the reality of our current professional relationship, I finished for him. I understand it may feel awkward given recent personal developments, but I assure you that this review will be conducted based solely on your work performance and professional contributions. Ryan finally took the offered seat, though his posture remained tense and uncertain. He kept glancing around the office as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing, still processing the fact that I'd been keeping this promotion secret throughout our relationship. "How long have you known about this partnership?" he asked, his voice strained. "The final details were confirmed last Friday," I replied truthfully. "I'd been under consideration for several months, but I preferred not to discuss it until everything was official." This was accurate, though it didn't capture the full timeline of my advancement within the company or the strategic planning that had led to Michael's offer. Ryan had never shown much interest in my professional development, generally assuming that his own career trajectory was more significant than mine. So, when we were planning the engagement party, when we were talking about our future together, you knew you were about to become my boss? The accusation in his tone was unmistakable. "I knew I was being considered for advancement," I corrected. "Just as I assume you've been aware that your relationship with my sister was developing while you were planning our wedding." The comparison hung in the air between us, highlighting the hypocrisy of his indignation. He'd been keeping secrets that fundamentally undermined our relationship, while criticizing me for maintaining appropriate professional confidentiality about career developments. "That's completely different," he protested, though he couldn't seem to articulate exactly how. "Is it?" I asked calmly. "You've been building a romantic relationship with my sister while planning a future with me. I've been building my professional capabilities while supporting your career advancement. Which one of those situations represents a more serious betrayal of trust?" Ryan opened his mouth to respond, then apparently thought better of whatever he'd been planning to say. The logic of my comparison was difficult to dispute, and any attempt to defend his actions would only make him look worse. "Let's focus on the purpose of this meeting," I continued, opening his personnel file. "Your performance review covers the past quarter, and I have specific feedback about your client management and project contributions." For the next 30 minutes, I conducted the most professional performance review of my career, discussing Ryan's strengths and areas for improvement with the same objectivity I would have shown any other employee. His work was competent, but not exceptional. His client relationships adequate, but not particularly deep. His strategic contributions minimal, but not problematic. "Overall, your performance meets expectations," I concluded. "I'd like to see more initiative in business development and stronger follow-through on project details, but there are no major concerns about your current contributions." Ryan listened to the feedback with obvious discomfort, clearly struggling to process receiving professional criticism from someone he'd been planning to marry just days earlier. The power dynamic between us had shifted so fundamentally that he seemed unable to respond with his usual confidence. "Do you have any questions about the evaluation or the areas I've identified for improvement?" I asked. "No," he said quietly. "I think it's all very clear." "Good. I'll be scheduling follow-up meetings with all team members over the next few weeks to discuss strategic direction and professional development opportunities. You'll receive a calendar invitation for your session." As Ryan prepared to leave, he paused at the door, turning back with an expression that suggested he wanted to address the personal dimensions of our situation. I maintained my professional demeanor, waiting to see if he would cross that boundary. "Amanda, about Saturday night," he began hesitantly. "Saturday night was a personal matter," I interrupted firmly. "This is a professional environment, and I prefer to keep those discussions separate." He nodded, apparently recognizing that any attempt to justify or explain his actions would be inappropriate in this context. "I understand." After he left, I sat in my office feeling an unexpected sense of resolution. The conversation had been difficult but not devastating. Uncomfortable but not unprofessional. I'd successfully maintained appropriate boundaries while establishing the new dynamic that would govern our working relationship. More importantly, I'd discovered that my professional identity remained strong and secure despite the personal chaos Ryan and Chloe had created. The skills and expertise that had earned me this partnership couldn't be diminished by someone else's poor choices or emotional betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text from Chloe that I deleted without reading, unwilling to engage with whatever justification or explanation she thought might repair the damage she'd caused. There would be time eventually for family conversations about healing and forgiveness, but not today, and not on her timeline. Instead, I focused on the client calls and strategic planning that filled the rest of my day, finding satisfaction in work that responded to skill and effort rather than the unpredictable dynamics of personal relationships. The promotion I'd earned was mine regardless of what happened in other areas of my life, a reminder that professional success provided a foundation that couldn't be shaken by romantic disappointment. By late afternoon, word had apparently spread through the office about the morning's review session. Several colleagues stopped by to congratulate me on the partnership, and I sensed a new level of respect in their interactions. Not because of the drama surrounding my personal life, but because of recognition that I'd handled a potentially explosive situation with grace and professionalism. As I prepared to leave for the day, Michael knocked on my door with an expression of quiet satisfaction. "How did the Torres review go?" he asked. "Professionally and appropriately," I replied. He understands the new reporting structure and received clear feedback about his performance expectations. "Good. And how are you feeling about everything?" The question touched on more than just the morning's meeting, encompassing the broader challenge of rebuilding after betrayal and public humiliation. "Stronger than I expected," I admitted, focused on moving forward rather than looking backward. "That's exactly what I hoped to hear." As I gathered my things and prepared to head home, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. The woman who'd been blindsided at her own engagement party had found her footing in a new professional role that offered both challenge and satisfaction. The relationship that had defined my personal identity was over, but the career I'd built remained a source of strength and purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Saturday evening, a sense of anticipation rather than dread about what came next. The future Ryan and Chloe had destroyed was being replaced by possibilities they couldn't touch or diminish. The weeks following Ryan's performance review established a new rhythm that I found surprisingly satisfying. My role as senior partner demanded strategic thinking and client relationship management that utilized skills I'd been developing for years, but never fully unleashed. The professional challenges provided structure and purpose that helped contain the emotional turbulence of processing betrayal while building something meaningful from the wreckage. Michael and I worked seamlessly together, our complementary strengths creating opportunities for business expansion that neither of us could have achieved independently. His experience and industry connections combined with my analytical approach and fresh perspective generated innovative solutions for our clients' evolving needs. The partnership was validating in ways that extended far beyond financial success, proving that my professional instincts and strategic thinking were valuable assets in their own right. Ryan maintained scrupulous professionalism in our limited workplace interactions, though the discomfort was evident in his carefully neutral expressions and formal communication style. He'd clearly received advice about appropriate workplace behavior, possibly from a lawyer or human resources consultant, and was following guidelines designed to prevent any appearance of harassment or inappropriate conduct. The irony wasn't lost on me that he was now more respectful and considerate than he'd been during our romantic relationship. His work performance showed modest improvement in the areas I'd identified during his review, suggesting that professional accountability was motivating him in ways that personal commitment hadn't. Client follow-through was more thorough, project documentation more detailed, business development efforts more consistent. Nothing spectacular, but solid progress that I could acknowledge without personal bias affecting my evaluation. The broader company culture seemed energized by the partnership transition, with employees responding positively to expanded opportunities for advancement and professional development. Several junior staff members had approached me about mentoring relationships, eager to learn from someone who'd navigated the climb from entry-level positions to senior leadership. Their enthusiasm reminded me of my own early career ambitions and the importance of creating pathways for others to achieve similar growth. Chloe had attempted contact multiple times through calls, texts, and social media messages that I consistently ignored. I wasn't ready for conversations about forgiveness or family healing, particularly when her outreach seemed more focused on managing her own guilt than addressing the legitimate anger and hurt she'd caused. Her lifestyle blog had gone conspicuously quiet since the engagement party disaster, suggesting that even her carefully curated online persona couldn't easily incorporate the story of stealing her sister's fiancé. My parents had handled the family fallout with characteristic dignity, making it clear to both Chloe and Ryan that their choices had consequences extending beyond their personal happiness. Dad had been particularly direct in expressing his disappointment, not just about the betrayal itself, but about the cruel timing and public nature of their announcement. Mom's response was more subtle, but equally firm, withdrawing the warm acceptance she'd previously shown Ryan while maintaining polite distance from Chloe's attempts to normalize the situation. The social aftermath proved more complex than I'd anticipated. Some friends rallied with supportive indignation that was both comforting and slightly overwhelming, while others seemed to treat the drama as entertainment, fishing for details about my emotional state or speculating about potential reconciliation. A few mutual acquaintances appeared uncomfortable around me, as if betrayal might be contagious or my presence might create awkward social dynamics they preferred to avoid. Natalie remained my most consistent source of support, calling regularly from Dallas to check on my emotional progress and professional adjustment. Her perspective as someone who knew me before Ryan helped maintain connection to aspects of my identity that existed independently of romantic relationships or family drama. "You sound different," she observed during one of our evening calls. "More confident, maybe? Like you're remembering who you were before you started accommodating someone else's limitations." The comment resonated deeply because it captured something I'd been feeling but hadn't articulated. The constant negotiation of Ryan's insecurities about my professional success had gradually diminished my willingness to fully embrace my own capabilities. Without that constraint, I was rediscovering the ambitious, strategic thinker who'd initially attracted Michael's attention and earned this partnership opportunity. 3 weeks after the engagement party disaster, an unexpected development complicated the carefully maintained boundaries I'd established. Ryan's direct supervisor, Janet Coleman, requested a meeting to discuss concerns about team dynamics and project allocation. Janet was a seasoned professional with 20 years of experience in client services, someone whose judgment I respected and whose observations carried significant weight. "I need to address something delicate," she began, settling into the chair across from my desk with the expression of someone prepared for an uncomfortable conversation. "It's about Ryan Torres and the current team structure." I waited for her to continue, curious about what specific issues had prompted this discussion. "Ryan's been expressing concerns about reporting relationships and evaluation processes," Janet explained carefully. "He's worried that personal conflicts might affect his professional treatment, and frankly, some of his colleagues are starting to pick up on the tension." The revelation that Ryan was discussing our situation with coworkers was troubling, particularly since I'd made every effort to maintain appropriate professional boundaries. "What kind of concerns is he expressing?" "Nothing explicitly inappropriate," Janet clarified quickly. "But he's asked multiple questions about review criteria, evaluation timing, and promotion processes that suggest he's worried about bias. He's also made several comments about preferring to work on projects that don't require direct interaction with senior partnership. This was more problematic than his initial discomfort with our changed dynamic." If Ryan was creating the impression that I might treat him unfairly, it could undermine both my credibility as a leader and the team's confidence in fair treatment. The irony was bitter. He was now worried about professional consequences from the personal chaos he'd created. Have other team members expressed similar concerns? I asked. Not directly, but there's definitely awareness that something personal happened between you two. People are being careful about what they say and how they interact when you're both present. Janet paused delicately. It's creating an undercurrent of tension that's affecting team cohesion. The situation required immediate attention before Ryan's anxiety about imaginary bias created real problems for team morale and productivity. I needed to address his concerns directly while establishing clear expectations for professional behavior that wouldn't tolerate subtle undermining of leadership authority. I'd like to schedule another meeting with Ryan to clarify expectations and address his concerns directly, I decided. Can you be present as his direct supervisor to ensure proper documentation and witness-neutral feedback? Absolutely, Janet agreed. I think direct communication is the best approach for everyone involved. The three-way meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday, giving me time to prepare talking points that would address Ryan's concerns while establishing firm boundaries around appropriate workplace behavior. The goal was to eliminate any ambiguity about professional expectations while demonstrating fairness and transparency in my leadership approach. Meanwhile, an unexpected opportunity emerged that would significantly expand my influence within Austin's business community. Helen Rodriguez, a prominent attorney whose daughter had attended the engagement party, called to invite me to join the board of directors for the Austin Women's Professional Network. The organization supported career advancement for women in business through mentoring programs, networking events, and advocacy initiatives. We need someone with your combination of strategic thinking and recent leadership transition experience, Helen explained during our lunch meeting at Chez Laurent. The board is looking to expand our programming for emerging professionals, and your perspective would be invaluable. The invitation was both flattering and strategically appealing. Board service would expand my professional network beyond the digital marketing industry while positioning me as a thought leader in women's career advancement. The timing felt appropriate, using my own experience with professional growth and personal resilience to help other women navigate similar challenges. I'm honored by the invitation, I replied. What would be the time commitment and specific focus areas? Monthly board meetings plus participation in 2 major events per year. We're particularly interested in developing programming around leadership transition, workplace dynamics, and building resilience in competitive environments. Helen's smile suggested she was aware of the personal relevance of these topics to my recent experience. Those are areas where I could definitely contribute meaningful perspective, I acknowledged, recognizing the opportunity to transform personal challenges into professional value for others. The board appointment was finalized within a week, adding another dimension to my evolving professional identity. The work would be demanding but rewarding, offering opportunities to influence policy discussions and career development programs that could benefit hundreds of women throughout the region. Tuesday's meeting with Ryan and Janet proceeded with the professional efficiency I'd hoped to achieve. Ryan's concerns about bias and evaluation fairness were addressed directly through clear documentation of review criteria and advancement processes that applied equally to all employees. His anxiety about working closely with senior partnership was acknowledged and accommodated through project assignments that minimized direct interaction while maintaining his professional development opportunities. I want to be absolutely clear, I stated as we concluded the discussion. Your professional treatment will be based solely on documented performance and contribution metrics. Personal history has no bearing on workplace evaluation or advancement opportunities. I appreciate that clarification, Ryan replied, though his body language suggested ongoing discomfort with the situation. However, I continued, I also expect professional behavior that doesn't undermine team cohesion or create unnecessary workplace tension. Concerns about fairness should be addressed through appropriate channels rather than informal discussions that could affect team morale. The message was unmistakable. While I would treat him fairly, I wouldn't tolerate behavior that questioned my professional integrity or created problems for other employees. Ryan nodded his understanding, apparently recognizing that his options for managing the situation were limited. "Any questions about expectations or reporting procedures going forward?" Janet asked. "No," Ryan replied. "Everything is very clear." After he left, Janet remained for a brief debriefing about team dynamics and monitoring strategies. "I think that went well," she observed. "Clear communication usually resolves these kinds of concerns before they become bigger problems." "Agreed. Let me know if you notice any ongoing issues or if other team members express concerns about workplace fairness." "Will do. And Amanda, I want you to know that your handling of this situation has been exemplary. Not everyone could maintain such professionalism under these circumstances." The validation meant more than Janet probably realized. Leading effectively while processing personal betrayal required constant vigilance about separating emotions from professional judgment, and recognition that I was succeeding in that balance was deeply satisfying. As October progressed into November, the rhythm of my new life became increasingly comfortable. The partnership responsibilities challenged me intellectually while providing financial security that eliminated concerns about independent living expenses. The board service offered opportunities to influence meaningful change in women's professional development. The social connections I was building through work and community involvement created a support network that wasn't dependent on romantic relationships or family dynamics. Chloe's attempts at contact had dwindled to occasional social media interactions that I continued to ignore. Her relationship with Ryan appeared to be progressing, based on posts I couldn't entirely avoid seeing through mutual connections, though neither seemed particularly eager to broadcast their happiness given the circumstances of its beginning. The lifestyle blog she'd built remained largely dormant, suggesting that even her online persona was struggling to incorporate the narrative of their relationship. My parents had adjusted to the new family dynamic with characteristic resilience, maintaining relationships with both their daughters while making clear that reconciliation would require genuine accountability rather than superficial apologies. Dad's business background helped him understand the professional complications Chloe and Ryan had created, while Mom's teaching experience provided insight into the long-term relationship repair that would be necessary. "Take your time processing everything," Mom advised during one of our weekly coffee meetings. "Forgiveness isn't something you owe anyone on their timeline, especially when they haven't demonstrated genuine understanding of the damage they caused." The advice reinforced my instinct to focus on building my new life, rather than rushing toward family harmony that might not be sustainable. Trust, once broken so dramatically, required time and consistent behavior to rebuild, if it could be rebuilt at all. An unexpected test of my emotional resilience came when Ryan submitted a request for vacation time that would coincide with Thanksgiving week. The date suggested he was planning to spend the holiday with Chloe and possibly meet her family in their new context as a couple. The image of him sitting at our family table, sharing meals with relatives who'd witnessed his betrayal, was more disturbing than I'd anticipated. Processing the request required professional detachment while acknowledging the personal impact of imagining that scenario. Ryan was entitled to use his vacation time as he chose, and my approval couldn't be based on personal preferences about how he spent those days. Yet the thought of him integrating into family celebrations as Chloe's boyfriend, occupying space that had previously been his as my fiancé, highlighted how completely our lives had been rearranged. I approved the request with standard documentation, maintaining professional protocols while privately deciding to make alternative plans for Thanksgiving that wouldn't require sharing space with either Ryan or Chloe. Natalie had already invited me to spend the holiday with her family in Dallas, an offer that suddenly seemed like the perfect solution for avoiding complicated family dynamics. The decision to skip traditional family celebrations wasn't about punishing anyone or creating drama, but about protecting my own emotional well-being while everyone adjusted to new realities. There would be time for family gatherings once the immediate awkwardness had settled and clearer boundaries had been established. As November continued, I found myself looking forward rather than backward, excited about upcoming projects and opportunities rather than dwelling on what had been lost. The woman who'd been blindsided at her engagement party was evolving into someone stronger and more self-assured, someone whose happiness didn't depend on other people's choices or approval. The professional success I was experiencing felt more satisfying than romantic relationships had, possibly because it was based on capabilities I could control and develop, rather than the unpredictable dynamics of human emotion. The board service was opening doors to influence and impact that extended far beyond my immediate workplace, creating opportunities to shape career development for other women facing similar challenges. Most importantly, I was discovering aspects of my personality and ambition that had been suppressed during my relationship with Ryan. The constant accommodation of his insecurities about my success had gradually dimmed my willingness to fully embrace my own potential. Without that constraint, I was remembering the ambitious, strategic thinker who'd initially earned Michael's attention and respect. The future I was building looked nothing like the one I'd planned with Ryan, but it was entirely my own creation, shaped by choices and priorities that reflected my authentic values rather than compromises designed to make someone else comfortable. That realization brought a sense of liberation that was worth more than any relationship that required me to diminish myself for someone else's peace of mind. The confrontation I'd been unconsciously preparing for arrived on a crisp December morning when Chloe appeared in Tech Forward's reception area, asking to speak with me privately. I watched through my office windows as she chatted nervously with our receptionist, her usual confident demeanor replaced by obvious anxiety about this unscheduled visit to my workplace. 6 weeks had passed since the engagement party disaster, and this was our first face-to-face encounter since that devastating evening. She looked thinner than usual, her carefully maintained lifestyle blogger appearance showing signs of strain despite perfectly applied makeup and designer clothing. The polished exterior couldn't quite mask the underlying tension that seemed to radiate from her posture and expression. "Your sister is here to see you," my assistant announced through the intercom. "Should I schedule something, or would you prefer to handle this now?" The question forced an immediate decision about boundaries and timing. Meeting with Chloe at my workplace would establish that any conversation between us would occur on my terms, in an environment where I held authority and felt secure. Alternatively, refusing to see her would appear petty and might escalate whatever crisis had prompted this visit. "Give me 5 minutes, then show her in," I decided, using the time to clear my desk and mentally prepare for what would likely be an emotionally charged conversation. Chloe entered my office with uncharacteristic hesitation, her eyes taking in the executive furnishings and cityscape view that demonstrated just how significantly my professional status had changed since she'd last paid attention to my career. The visual evidence of my success seemed to surprise her, as if she'd continued thinking of me as Ryan's supportive girlfriend, rather than an accomplished professional in my own right. "Amanda," she began, settling into the chair across from my desk with obvious discomfort. "Thank you for agreeing to see me. I know this is awkward." "What can I do for you, Chloe?" I asked, maintaining the polite professionalism I'd use with any visitor while offering no warmth that might encourage emotional manipulation. She twisted her hands in her lap, a nervous gesture I remembered from our childhood when she'd been caught in some misbehavior and was calculating how to minimize consequences. "I need to talk to you about Ryan and me, about what happened and where things stand now." "I'm not sure what there is to discuss," I replied calmly. "You made your choices very publicly. I've moved on with my life accordingly." "But we're family," she protested, her voice carrying the plaintive tone she'd always used when appealing to parental sympathy. "We can't just never speak to each other again over a man." The casual dismissal of Ryan as merely a man, rather than my former fiancé revealed how completely she'd reframed the situation to minimize her own culpability. In her version of events, this was apparently a minor disagreement between sisters that could be resolved through family loyalty, rather than a fundamental betrayal of trust that had permanently altered our relationship. "You're right that we're family," I acknowledged, "which makes your choice to pursue my fiancé while planning our wedding particularly difficult to understand or forgive." Chloe's expression shifted to something approaching defiance, a familiar pattern from childhood arguments where she'd eventually abandon remorse in favor of justifying her actions. "You don't understand what really happened between Ryan and me. It wasn't planned or calculated. We just connected in a way that was impossible to ignore." "When did this connection begin?" I asked directly, curious to see how much truth she was willing to acknowledge. She hesitated, clearly realizing that any honest answer would reveal the extent of her deception. "It developed gradually over several months. We tried to fight it, but eventually we had to acknowledge what we were feeling." "Several months," I repeated slowly. "So while I was planning our wedding, addressing invitations, tasting cakes, and discussing our future together, you and Ryan were developing feelings that you both chose to act on, rather than address appropriately." "It wasn't like that," Chloe protested, though her inability to meet my eyes suggested she recognized the validity of my characterization. "We didn't plan for this to happen. Love doesn't follow convenient timelines." The phrase sounded rehearsed, possibly something Ryan had said to justify their choices to himself or others. The romantic notion that love conquered all moral obligations was a convenient narrative for people unwilling to accept responsibility for their actions. "Love may not follow convenient timelines," I agreed, "but decent people make choices about how to handle inconvenient feelings. You could have distanced yourself from Ryan when you recognized the attraction. You could have talked to me directly about concerns regarding our relationship. You could have approached the situation with honesty instead of deception." "Would you have listened?" she challenged, her tone becoming more defensive. "Would you have really been open to hearing that Ryan might not be as happy as he seemed?" The question revealed more about her thought process than she probably intended. Chloe had apparently convinced herself that she was rescuing Ryan from an unsatisfying relationship rather than pursuing her own desires at my expense. The narrative painted her as a savior rather than a betrayer, allowing her to feel justified in her choices. "We'll never know, will we?" I replied. "Because you chose deception instead of honesty, manipulation instead of direct communication." "I'm trying to apologize," Chloe said, her voice rising slightly with frustration at my refusal to accept her preferred version of events. "I'm trying to make things right between us." "What exactly are you apologizing for?" I asked, genuinely curious about her understanding of the situation. "For the way everything happened, for hurting you, for the timing and the public nature of the announcement." She paused, apparently expecting some acknowledgement of her contrition. "And what about the choices that led to that moment?" I pressed. "The months of deception, the planning behind my back, the decision to pursue a relationship with my fiancé while pretending to support our wedding?" Chloe's expression hardened slightly, revealing the limits of her willingness to accept responsibility. "I can't apologize for falling in love, Amanda. I can regret how it happened, but I can't pretend that what Ryan and I have found together isn't real and meaningful." There it was, the boundary of her remorse. She would apologize for the inconvenience and embarrassment her choices had caused, but not for the fundamental betrayal of trust that had made those choices possible. In her mind, the authenticity of her feelings with Ryan justified the destruction of my relationship and the violation of family loyalty. "I see," I said quietly. "So you're apologizing for getting caught and causing a scene, but not for the betrayal itself. That's not fair," she protested. "I genuinely care about your feelings and our relationship as sisters. If that were true, you would have considered my feelings before pursuing Ryan, not after getting caught. The conversation was revealing exactly what I'd suspected. Chloe had come here seeking absolution that would allow her to continue her relationship with Ryan without the inconvenience of family disapproval. She wanted forgiveness on her terms, without the genuine accountability that would be necessary for any real reconciliation. "What would it take?" she asked finally. "What would I need to do to repair our relationship?" The question suggested she still believed this was a problem that could be solved through the right combination of gestures and words, that trust could be rebuilt without fundamental changes in her behavior or understanding of boundaries. "Honestly, I don't know if it can be repaired," I admitted. "Trust, once broken this completely, doesn't just heal because someone wants it to." "But we're family," she repeated, as if genetic connection could override the impact of her choices. "Yes, we are. And family relationships require mutual respect and consideration that you've demonstrated you're not willing or able to provide." Chloe was quiet for several moments, apparently processing the reality that I wasn't going to offer easy forgiveness or immediate reconciliation. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted to something harder and more calculating. "You know, Ryan's been telling me about the situation at work," she said, watching my expression carefully. "He's concerned about potential bias in his performance, evaluations, and advancement opportunities." The implied threat was unmistakable. If I didn't cooperate with her desire for family harmony, she might encourage Ryan to escalate his workplace concerns or pursue formal complaints about unfair treatment. The suggestion revealed how little she understood about professional protocols or my own integrity as a leader. "Ryan's performance evaluations are documented and conducted according to established company protocols," I replied evenly. "Any concerns about bias or unfair treatment can be addressed through appropriate human resources channels." "But you have to admit the situation is complicated," she pressed. "Having authority over your ex-fiancé's career after he left you for your sister creates obvious conflicts of interest." The phrase "left you for your sister" was particularly cruel, designed to emphasize my rejection while minimizing her own role in creating the situation. Chloe was showing me exactly who she was when her attempts at manipulation weren't working. Someone willing to use professional threats to get what she wanted personally. "The situation is what Ryan made it when he chose to announce your relationship." "At our engagement party," I corrected. "I didn't create this dynamic, and I won't be manipulated by threats of workplace complaints." "I'm not threatening anything," she said quickly, realizing she'd overplayed her hand. "I'm just concerned about everyone moving forward successfully." "Then you should encourage Ryan to focus on his work performance rather than creating workplace drama based on imaginary problems." The conversation was revealing the futility of any attempt at reconciliation. Chloe hadn't come here to make genuine amends or accept responsibility for her actions. She'd come seeking my blessing for her relationship with Ryan and my cooperation in making everyone comfortable with the new arrangements. When that approach failed, she'd resorted to veiled threats about professional complications. "I think we're done here," I said, standing to signal the end of our meeting. "You're welcome to maintain whatever relationship makes you happy with Ryan, but don't expect my participation or approval." "Amanda, please," she began, but I was already moving toward the door. "This is my workplace, Chloe. I'd prefer that future personal conversations happen elsewhere." She gathered her purse and stood reluctantly, apparently recognizing that her mission had failed completely. "I hope you'll reconsider eventually. Family should be more important than holding grudges." "I agree," I replied, opening the door. To signal her departure. "Family should be important enough to warrant honesty and respect, not betrayal and manipulation." After she left, I sat in my office processing the conversation and its implications. Chloe's visit had confirmed my instincts about her motivations and character, eliminating any lingering doubt about the impossibility of simple reconciliation. She wasn't seeking forgiveness because she understood the harm she'd caused, but because maintaining family relationships would be more convenient for her ongoing happiness with Ryan. The veiled threats about workplace bias revealed her willingness to weaponize professional relationships when personal manipulation failed. This information would be valuable if Ryan did escalate concerns about unfair treatment, providing context about potential external pressure influencing his behavior. More importantly, the conversation had demonstrated how much I'd grown since the engagement party disaster. 6 weeks ago, I would have been devastated by Chloe's casual dismissal of my feelings and her refusal to accept genuine responsibility. Today, I felt only clarity about the boundaries necessary to protect myself from further manipulation. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael asking about the unexpected visitor, apparently having noticed Chloe's dramatic appearance in our professional environment. I responded that it was a personal matter that had been resolved quickly and wouldn't affect workplace operations. The afternoon brought a series of client calls and strategic planning sessions that reminded me why professional success felt more satisfying than the complicated dynamics of family relationships. These were challenges that responded to skill and effort, relationships built on mutual benefit rather than genetic obligation, achievements that couldn't be diminished by other people's poor choices. Daniel Kim, our head of business development, knocked on my door around 4 o'clock with news that would significantly expand our growth opportunities. Amanda, we just received an inquiry from Morrison Financial about a comprehensive digital transformation project. They're looking for a partner who can handle strategy, implementation, and long-term support. The Morrison account would be our largest client engagement to date, representing not just immediate revenue, but the kind of prestige project that would establish Tech Forward as a major player in Austin's business consulting market. The scope of work would require coordination across all our departments and demonstrate our capabilities to other potential enterprise clients. What's their timeline? I asked, already mentally calculating resource allocation and project management requirements. Initial proposal due next Friday, with implementation beginning in January if we're selected. They want to meet with senior leadership next week to discuss our approach and capabilities. This was exactly the kind of opportunity that validated Michael's decision to offer me partnership and my own choice to prioritize professional growth over relationship maintenance. The skills and expertise I'd developed were creating value that extended far beyond my immediate circumstances, building a foundation for long-term success that no one could take away. Let's schedule a preparation meeting for tomorrow morning, I decided. I want to review their current infrastructure and develop a comprehensive proposal that demonstrates our strategic thinking and implementation capabilities. Already on it, Daniel confirmed. I've pulled together preliminary research and identified the key decision-makers we'll need to influence. As Daniel departed to begin proposal preparation, I reflected on the contrast between this productive professional challenge and the futile personal conversation with Chloe. The Morrison Project represented an opportunity to create something valuable through skill and collaboration, while my sister's visit had been an attempt to manipulate emotional obligations for her own benefit. The difference was illuminating in ways that extended beyond immediate circumstances. Professional relationships, while not immune to personal dynamics, were generally governed by clear expectations and mutual benefit that made them more predictable and satisfying than family connections based on obligation rather than genuine compatibility. That evening, I worked late preparing for the Morrison proposal, energized by the challenge of developing innovative solutions for complex business problems. The office was quiet except for the soft hum of computer equipment and occasional traffic sounds from the street below. This solitude felt peaceful rather than lonely, productive rather than isolating. Around 8 o'clock, Ryan appeared in my office doorway, apparently having stayed late to work on his own projects. The timing seemed coincidental, but given Chloe's visit earlier in the day, I wondered if they'd planned some coordinated approach to addressing our family and workplace complications. Amanda, he said hesitantly, do you have a few minutes to talk? About work matters? I asked, maintaining appropriate boundaries around personal discussions in professional settings. Actually, it's about Chloe's visit today, he admitted. She told me about your conversation, and I wanted to address some concerns. This confirmed my suspicion that their outreach efforts were coordinated, designed to pressure me from multiple angles into accepting their relationship and facilitating their comfort with the situation they'd created. Your relationship with my sister isn't something I discuss in workplace settings, I replied firmly. If you have concerns about professional matters, those can be addressed through appropriate channels. But the personal and professional are connected in this case, he pressed. Chloe mentioned that you seemed unwilling to consider reconciliation, and I'm worried about how that might affect our working relationship. The attempt to frame my refusal to forgive them as a threat to workplace harmony was particularly manipulative, suggesting that maintaining professional boundaries somehow demonstrated bias or inappropriate behavior on my part. My personal relationships don't affect my professional responsibilities, I assured him. Your work performance will continue to be evaluated based on documented criteria and standard company protocols. I appreciate that, Ryan said, though his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. But I think we should acknowledge that this situation is unusual and requires some accommodation from everyone involved. The word accommodation was telling, implying that I should adjust my expectations or behavior to make their choices more comfortable rather than expecting them to handle the consequences of their own actions. The situation is what you made it, I reminded him. I'm not responsible for accommodating complications you created through your own choices. Ryan was quiet for a moment, apparently realizing that his approach wasn't achieving the desired result. Look, I know the timing and circumstances were terrible. I regret how everything happened, but I can't regret finding real happiness with Chloe. The sentiment echoed his engagement party speech, prioritizing his own happiness over the impact of his choices on others. This seemed to be a consistent pattern in his thinking. Consequences that affected other people were unfortunate, but acceptable as long as he achieved what he wanted. I understand that you're happy, I replied. I'm not asking you to regret your choices or change your relationship. I'm simply not going to pretend that trust can be rebuilt instantly or that family dynamics can return to normal without significant time and genuine accountability. How long? He asked. How long before we can all move past this and have normal relationships again? The question revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. Ryan seemed to believe that forgiveness was something he could earn through appropriate behavior over a defined period, after which all consequences of his actions would be erased and relationships would return to their previous state. I don't know, I answered honestly. Trust, once broken this completely, may never fully recover. That's a risk you chose to take when you decided to pursue my sister while planning our wedding. But we have to work together, he pointed out. We have to find a way to make this functional. We do work together quite successfully, I agreed. Your performance has actually improved since our personal relationship ended. Professional relationships can function effectively even when personal trust has been compromised. This seemed to frustrate him, possibly because he'd hoped that workplace complications would motivate me to prioritize reconciliation for practical reasons rather than emotional ones. Fine, he said finally, but I hope you'll consider that holding on to anger indefinitely only hurts you in the long run. The unsolicited advice about managing my emotions was condescending and inappropriate, particularly coming from someone who'd created the situation requiring emotional management. Ryan was essentially telling me that my refusal to forgive him quickly was a character flaw rather than a natural response to betrayal. I'll manage my emotional well-being in whatever way seems appropriate, I replied coolly, just as you've managed yours. After he left, I returned to the Morrison proposal with renewed focus, finding satisfaction in work that offered clear objectives and measurable results. The professional challenges ahead would be demanding but rewarding, providing opportunities to demonstrate capabilities that no personal drama could diminish or destroy. The conversation with Ryan had confirmed what Chloe's visit had already suggested. They wanted forgiveness and family harmony on their terms, without genuine accountability or meaningful change in their understanding of appropriate boundaries. This wasn't about healing relationships so much as managing their own guilt and social discomfort. That realization was liberating rather than disappointing, eliminating any obligation I might have felt to facilitate their emotional comfort at the expense of my own healing process. Professional success and personal resilience were achievements I could control and develop, unlike family relationships that required mutual respect and consideration that some people were unwilling or unable to provide. The Morrison financial presentation took place on a frigid January morning in their downtown headquarters, a gleaming 40-story tower that housed one of Austin's most prestigious investment firms. Michael and I arrived early to set up our materials and review our strategy one final time before meeting with their executive committee. The opportunity represented everything we'd been building toward: a chance to establish Tech Forward as a legitimate player in enterprise-level digital transformation. 6 months had passed since the engagement party disaster, and I'd found my rhythm as senior partner in ways that exceeded even my own expectations. The Morrison account would be our crowning achievement, validating not just our company's capabilities, but my own strategic vision for growth and market positioning. The presentation materials we'd prepared demonstrated sophisticated understanding of their challenges and innovative solutions that would set new standards for our industry. "Ready for this?" Michael asked as we waited in the marble-appointed conference room where Morrison's decision-makers would evaluate our proposal against 3 competing firms. "More than ready," I replied, feeling the quiet confidence that came from thorough preparation and genuine expertise. "We've developed something special here." The Morrison executive team filed in promptly at 9 o'clock, led by CEO Patricia Morrison, a formidable woman in her 50s whose reputation for demanding excellence was legendary throughout Austin's business community. Her presence alone elevated the significance of this opportunity, and I felt energized rather than intimidated by the challenge of winning her approval. "Ms. Hayes, Mr. Carter," she began, settling into the head chair with the commanding presence that had built Morrison Financial into a regional powerhouse. "We're looking forward to understanding how Tech Forward can help us modernize our operations while maintaining the client relationships that are our foundation." For the next 90 minutes, Michael and I presented our comprehensive analysis of Morrison's digital infrastructure needs, our phased implementation strategy, and the measurable outcomes they could expect from our partnership. The presentation flowed seamlessly, our complementary strengths creating a compelling narrative that addressed both technical requirements and business objectives. Patricia's questions were incisive and challenging, exactly what I'd hoped for, from a leader whose standards matched my own. She probed our risk management protocols, timeline assumptions, and contingency planning with the thoroughness of someone who understood that digital transformation could either accelerate growth or create expensive disruptions if handled poorly. "Impressive work," she concluded as we finished our presentation. "Your analysis of our current limitations is more thorough than what we've seen from other firms, and your proposed solutions demonstrate genuine understanding of our industry's unique requirements." "Thank you," I replied. "We believe that effective digital transformation requires deep industry knowledge combined with technical innovation, not just off-the-shelf solutions applied generically." "Exactly right," Patricia agreed. "We'll be making our decision by Friday, but I wanted you to know that your proposal has set a high bar for our remaining presentations." As we packed up our materials and prepared to leave, Patricia approached me privately while Michael was gathering his laptop and notes. "Ms. Hayes, I've been following your career development with interest, particularly your recent partnership transition. Would you be open to having lunch next week to discuss some broader industry topics?" The invitation was unexpected, but clearly significant, suggesting that Patricia saw value in connecting beyond this immediate business opportunity. Her interest in my professional development felt like validation from someone whose opinion carried substantial weight in Austin's business community. "I'd be honored," I replied, genuinely excited by the possibility of building a mentoring relationship with someone of her stature and experience. "Excellent. My assistant will reach out to coordinate scheduling." The drive back to Tech Forward was filled with debriefing and cautious optimism about our chances of winning the Morrison account. Michael's satisfaction with our presentation was evident, and his confidence in my strategic contributions felt like professional validation that extended far beyond this single opportunity. "That was exceptional work," he said as we pulled into our parking garage. "Regardless of Morrison's decision, you've demonstrated leadership capabilities that position us for similar opportunities going forward." The praise meant more than Michael probably realized, confirming that my professional growth was based on genuine value creation rather than merely recovering from personal setbacks. The skills and insights I'd developed were translating into business success that would benefit our entire organization. Back in my office, I found a message from Helen Rodriguez requesting an urgent call about a sensitive matter involving the Austin Women's Professional Network Board. Her tone suggested something serious had developed that required immediate attention from board leadership. "Amanda," Helen began when I returned her call, "we have a situation that affects both the organization and you personally. I wanted to give you advance notice before it becomes public." A chill of apprehension ran through me as I tried to imagine what could warrant such careful handling. "What kind of situation?" "Chloe Hayes has applied to join our Emerging Professionals program and requested to participate in our spring networking conference. Her application includes references to recent life changes and personal growth that seem designed to generate sympathy without acknowledging her role in creating the circumstances she's now navigating." The revelation that Chloe was attempting to join the professional network I'd worked hard to support felt like another calculated intrusion into space I'd created independently of our family relationship. Her application suggested she was trying to leverage my professional connections for her own benefit while continuing to avoid accountability for her choices. "What does her application say specifically?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the general approach she'd taken. "She describes herself as someone who's learned valuable lessons about authentic relationships and personal integrity through recent challenges without providing specifics about what those challenges involved or her responsibility for creating them," Helen explained diplomatically. The language was classic Chloe, presenting herself as someone who'd grown through adversity rather than someone who'd created adversity through poor choices. Her application was apparently designed to generate sympathy and interest without acknowledging the actual circumstances that had prompted whatever personal reflection she claimed to have experienced. "She's also mentioned your success as inspiration for her own professional development goals," Helen continued. "The references create an implicit connection that could be awkward given your board position." This was exactly the kind of manipulation I'd come to expect from Chloe, using our family relationship to gain access to opportunities while simultaneously avoiding acknowledgement of how she'd damaged that relationship. Her approach suggested she still believed she could benefit from association with my achievements without accepting responsibility for her own actions. "What are you recommending?" I asked, trusting Helen's experience with similar situations involving complicated personal dynamics. "The board needs to discuss potential conflicts of interest and appropriate policies for situations where personal relationships might affect organizational dynamics," she replied carefully. "Your leadership has been invaluable, and we want to ensure that external complications don't compromise your effectiveness or comfort." The situation required delicate handling that balanced fairness to all applicants with protection of organizational culture and board member welfare. Chloe's application would need to be evaluated on its merits, but her apparent attempt to leverage family connections raised legitimate concerns about motivations and boundaries. "I appreciate the advance notice," I said. Let me know when the board wants to discuss this, and I'll recuse myself from any decisions directly involving her application. That's exactly the kind of professional approach I'd expect from you, Helen replied with evident approval. The conversation reminded me how extensively the consequences of Chloe and Ryan's choices continued to ripple through various aspects of my life. Even as I'd built new professional relationships and expanded my influence, their decisions kept creating complications that required ongoing management and boundary enforcement. 2 days later, Patricia Morrison's assistant called to confirm that Tech Forward had been selected for the digital transformation project, news that sent waves of celebration through our entire organization. The Morrison account would be our largest engagement to date, representing not just immediate revenue, but the kind of prestige client that would attract additional enterprise opportunities. This changes everything for us, Michael said during our impromptu celebration meeting with department heads. The Morrison relationship positions us as a legitimate player in enterprise consulting, not just a regional boutique firm. The victory felt deeply personal as well as professional, validating the strategic vision I'd been developing and the leadership capabilities I'd been demonstrating. The skills that had earned this partnership were entirely my own, undiminished by personal betrayals or family complications. That evening, I called Natalie to share the news and process the broader significance of reaching this professional milestone while continuing to navigate personal challenges. Her friendship had been a constant source of support and perspective, helping me maintain connection to aspects of my identity that existed independently of recent upheavals. "I'm so proud of you," she said after I described the Morrison presentation and selection. "You've not only survived what happened at the engagement party, you've used it as fuel for achieving something remarkable." "It doesn't feel like survival anymore," I admitted. "It feels like discovering who I was always meant to become once I stopped accommodating other people's limitations." "That's exactly right," Natalie agreed. "You've been exceptional all along. You just needed circumstances that allowed you to fully embrace those capabilities." The conversation reinforced my growing understanding that the professional success I was experiencing wasn't compensation for personal loss, but the natural result of finally prioritizing my own development and ambitions. The relationship with Ryan had required constant compromise of my professional identity, while my current situation encouraged full expression of my strategic thinking and leadership potential. A week later, Patricia Morrison and I met for lunch at a quiet restaurant near the Capitol, where she shared insights about navigating leadership challenges and building sustainable influence in male-dominated industries. Her mentorship offered perspectives that were both immediately practical and strategically valuable for long-term career development. "The most important lesson I've learned," she said over our main course, "is that authentic leadership requires integrating personal resilience with professional excellence. You can't compartmentalize indefinitely, but you also can't let personal challenges undermine your professional effectiveness." Her words resonated deeply with my own recent experience of learning to process betrayal while maintaining workplace performance and expanding business relationships. The integration she described was something I was still developing, finding ways to acknowledge emotional impacts without allowing them to limit professional growth. "I've been impressed by your handling of what I imagine have been challenging personal circumstances," Patricia continued diplomatically. "Professional networks are small and people talk, but you've maintained focus on value creation rather than drama management." The acknowledgement that my situation was known within Austin's business community was sobering, but not surprising. The engagement party disaster had been witnessed by too many people to remain completely private, and my subsequent professional advancement would naturally generate interest and speculation. "Thank you," I replied. "I've learned that the best response to personal setbacks is often professional excellence that speaks for itself." "Exactly right," Patricia agreed. "And, speaking of professional excellence, I'd like to discuss an opportunity that might interest you." Over the next 30 minutes, She outlined a strategic consulting role with Morrison Financial that would involve advising their executive team on digital transformation initiatives beyond the specific project Tech Forward was handling. The position would be part-time and project-based, designed to complement rather than compete with my partnership responsibilities. We need someone with your combination of technical expertise and strategic thinking to help us evaluate emerging opportunities and potential partnerships, she explained. The role would position you as a thought leader in digital innovation while expanding your influence within our industry network. The opportunity was both flattering and strategically appealing, offering ways to develop expertise and relationships that would benefit both my current partnership and future career options. Patricia's confidence in my capabilities felt like validation from someone whose standards were notoriously demanding. "I'm very interested," I replied, already imagining how the role might complement my existing responsibilities while opening new pathways for professional growth. "Excellent. I'll have our legal team prepare a consulting agreement that works for everyone involved." As winter progressed into spring, the rhythm of my new life became increasingly satisfying and sustainable. The Morrison project was exceeding expectations, generating additional referrals, and establishing Tech Forward's reputation for innovative enterprise solutions. My consulting work with Patricia's team was expanding my expertise in areas that would be valuable regardless of future career decisions. The board position with the Austin Women's Professional Network was providing opportunities to influence policy discussions and career development programs that benefited hundreds of women throughout the region. The work felt meaningful in ways that extended beyond personal achievement, creating value for others who might face similar challenges in male-dominated professional environments. Chloe's application to the Emerging Professionals program had been handled with appropriate neutrality, evaluated on its stated merits without consideration of family relationships or personal history. She'd been accepted based on her social media following and stated interest in business development, though her participation in networking events was minimal and appeared focused more on personal branding than genuine professional growth. Ryan's work performance had stabilized at competent but unremarkable levels, sufficient to maintain his position, but unlikely to lead to rapid advancement. His concerns about bias in evaluation had proven unfounded, as documented performance metrics demonstrated fair treatment based solely on professional contributions. The workplace dynamic between us had settled into polite efficiency that created no complications for team cohesion or productivity. Most importantly, I'd discovered aspects of my personality and ambition that had been dormant during my relationship with Ryan. The constant accommodation of his insecurities about my success had gradually constrained my willingness to fully embrace my own potential. Without that limitation, I was rediscovering the strategic thinker who'd initially earned Michael's attention and respect. The future I was building looked nothing like the one I'd planned with Ryan, but it was entirely my own creation, shaped by choices and priorities that reflected my authentic values rather than compromises designed to make someone else comfortable. Professional relationships based on mutual benefit and shared objectives proved more satisfying than romantic partnerships that required diminishing myself for someone else's emotional comfort. 1 year after the engagement party disaster, I stood in my corner office reviewing quarterly reports that demonstrated Tech Forward's transformation from regional consultancy to recognized enterprise partner. The Morrison relationship had generated additional opportunities with similar organizations, creating a growth trajectory that validated every strategic decision Michael and I had made during the partnership transition. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number that turned out to be from Ryan, congratulating me on receiving Austin Business Journal's Rising Leader Award and expressing hope that we could eventually rebuild some form of friendship. I deleted the message without responding, recognizing that certain bridges, once burned, were better left as ashes than rebuilt on compromised foundations. The award ceremony was scheduled for the following week, representing recognition from Austin's business community for achievements that were entirely independent of personal relationships or family dynamics. The honor felt like confirmation that professional excellence could indeed transcend personal setbacks, that capabilities developed through skill and effort couldn't be diminished by other people's choices. As I prepared to leave the office that evening, I reflected on how completely my life had been transformed by circumstances I'd never anticipated or desired. The woman who'd been blindsided at her engagement party had evolved into someone stronger, more self-assured, and more professionally accomplished than she'd ever imagined possible. The betrayal that had seemed catastrophic had actually created opportunities for growth and achievement that might never have emerged otherwise. Sometimes the most devastating personal losses create openings for our greatest professional contributions, forcing us to discover capabilities we'd never needed to develop while we were focused on maintaining relationships that limited our potential. Ryan and Chloe had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible, complete freedom to become exactly who I was meant to be, without constraint or compromise. Their betrayal had hurt deeply, but their liberation had been transformative. The future belonged entirely to me now, shaped by my own choices and limited only by my own ambitions. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.